So, the reason I was calling this interview a scoop is because I'm interested in that Convo story. What happened there? We had a world-renowned investor in the shape of, I believe, Umar Rashid is his name, the guy of Chegg. He invested in a GIK a GIK alumni founded company, Convo, and later on there is a mess there. I mean, can talk a little about that. What happened there?
So Convo was founded by this brilliant product designer Faizab Buzdar. He's a senior of mine from GIKI, and by who's now his wife, but back then she was the co-founder, Sabika. And Faizan single-handedly created this whole category of what is known as enterprise social networks. It's basically, think of it as Facebook for your own organization. And those the and I really do mean that. The team was such a great product team that the decisions they took back then are still decisions which stand today. So even today, as Integri, how internally we use Convo for all of our communication because there really isn't a better tool than Convo in the market yet. And I use every tool, Slack from everything. It's like okay. And so one of my goals always has been in my life has been, okay, how can I help and support Pakistan? And so I've been interviewed by Microsoft Seattle. I've turned down job offers from the West. I've always constantly avoided leaving the country. And when I look back, I'm like, yeah, that was such a bad decision. I should have left when I could, right? But then here was Faizan. What Faizan had done was he had built this internationally acclaimed company, and all the funding they raised majorly came to Pakistan. And so he was able to bring an impact in Pakistan while being abroad, right? So he sort of did the best of both worlds. And I looked at that, I'm like, that's what I want to learn. I thought that was the future for Pakistan. You build a company which is a global company, which has backends in Pakistan. And so you have a team in Pakistan, and so you still bring about impact. And if you look at the whole Tata, Infosys, Satyam, that's sort of how that has worked as well. And so I talked to Fizan. They knew about Pring. They knew that I was exiting Pring. And so I talked to Sharia Hadri, who was CEO at Convo, and I really liked Fizan. And Fizan was a phenomenal sort of a CEO executive. And so I joined in as VP of engineering. And I think, and I still think that Convo had a really fantastic team and so on. And what happened was, and this is again that same story just was telling you, entrepreneurs are in control when things are going well. Investors are in control when things aren't going well, right? The problem with the original team at Convo was that while they had done a tremendous job of building a really phenomenal product, they had a significant gap of sales and business development in the team. So there was really no person or sort of no, and they kept on hiring people in that role, but it was never successful. And so as a result, ये हुआ था कि Convo missed out a number of opportunities in terms of capturing the market. तो हमारे सामने ही Yammer बना. Yammer was at Twitter for work. It was acquired by Microsoft for I forget, but some ridiculous number like $1.5 billion. But when they got acquired, I think they had like a $65 million revenue, something like that. And so you could see all these companies doing a really phenomenal job with that. And Convo had everything. Was better than Yammer for Microsoft, is better than Salesforce. ऐसा करके था. And investors saw that too. And I think, and I will tell you this, in 2020, in 2021, it is very, very rare for investors, for a venture capital firm to change management of a seed or a Series A company. उसकी वजह है कि the company is too young. And if things aren't going well, you want to give the entrepreneurs more time. And if you as a VC remove the CEO that early, let's say कहेंगे they're not really performing well, the VC would be within their rights. उनके rights होते हैं, they can do that. However, it would be deeply unpopular because they know कि उन्होंने मजीद companies को fund करना है, and no company is going to come to them, no founder is going to come to them and say, yeah, these guys, if I don't perform well, these guys are going to kick me out, right? So so modern VCs do not do this. Like in case of Convo, ये हुआ था कि as Convo did not hit its performance goals, and this is my sense of the situation, there was more and more pressure from the existing investors कि यार इसको you need to do better job at sales तक करके. And as a result, if the company isn't growing, it's also hard to raise a funding round. And I do feel that Convo wasn't really able to raise money from at that time from the right people, the people they wanted to. And instead, what they did was, कि जो existing investors थे, they went back to them, and the existing investors saw that things are not going very well, so they basically took on terms where they had what is essentially super rights, super voting rights, and things like that. Now, like I said, it's very rare for investors to exercise these rights for such an early company. And historically, hota raha. Like Cisco ki kahani padhe, Valentine, he fired the wife and husband team. And I mean, the history is full of these stories. But
Probably Steve Jobs was
it,
fired from his company. Was that a
yeah,
similar situation? Yeah.
bilkul. Again, bilkul. And those, so the Bill Gates, sorry, the Steve Jobs story is looked upon as a historically bad decision from the board. However, Steve Jobs wouldn't have been Steve Jobs had he had not left the company. And then, the second coming of Steve Jobs. If you look at Steve Jobs' life, it's in three phases. That second phase of self-reflection and then becoming a great CEO in Act Three would not have happened if he didn't go through it. Anyway. The Cisco story is different. The year they fired the founders, I think the company did barely $1 million. The next year they did like almost like $50 million. So that was the right decision via the VC and all that. But anyway, so it becomes a bigger question. The question is, if a company isn't doing well, what is the responsibility of you if you're an entrepreneur, if you're not doing well, and there's going to be pressure from your board, there's going to be pressure from investors. What should you do, and what should investors do? So first and foremost, as a CEO, I look at things that I am mainly subservient to my board, and my board is basically appointed by my stakeholders. So all the people I've taken money from, मैं उनको जवाब दूं. I'm answerable to them, right? And if I don't have a really good answer, they are well within their rights to ask me to step down. So that's number one. It's rare, but that's their right. So if an investor asks me to step down, they're not asking for anything illegal. That is within their rights. Now, I would say कि legal bar बहुत low होता है. There has to be a higher bar of ethics. There has to be a higher bar of morality. इस तरह की सारी चीजें होती हैं. Um, if I truly believe कि मैं काम ठीक नहीं कर रहा as CEO, it is also my responsibility to my team कि I should then say कि अच्छा, here are the problems in the company. I am not the best person, and let's look for a better person or something like that. Now, without going into too much detail, this is the sort of conversation that was happening between the management and the investors who had these rights. They had the ability to remove them. And it sort of became really messy. Apparently, the management team didn't want to leave, and the investors wanted better performance, which is like a story as old as time with companies that aren't performing. And one thing led to another. The investors decided to pull their essential super voting rights or whatever that they had, and they basically asked Faizab to step down, and essentially they did a management change. And there was a lot of effort into keeping him on board, but the terms never really worked out. And obviously, you have to understand that building company is a deeply personal
No,
affair.
no, I
It is your
understand. I
baby.
understand. I mean, I understand
Yeah,
that it is well in everyone's right because as an entrepreneur, it's okay if something is not working. You want the right man for the right job. It's not about the egos.
yeah.
It's about growing the company, right? But in Convo, what we hear is happened is that the company employees sort of split in two in that sort of political tussle. Was it like that? It became a little political, and the employees were divided into two groups.
No, I think it's not that the employees were divided into groups. I think there was very clearly the management and then everybody else. And most of the employees were really kept in the dark about the actual struggle happening between the investors and the management. And we didn't have any visibility because most of this fight was taking place in the US. And by the time I was leaving the company, I had left the company, and I was in just sort of doing in my serving. I had decided to start my next company. I knew Convo was going through its tough period. I waited for as long as I could because I knew they were doing a fundraise. I didn't want a senior person to leave during their fundraise. I didn't want to impact any of those things. But I had given my resignation a good 3-4 months in advance, before all of this whole thing hit the fan. Um, what I will say is the things that went wrong was that it was a US company, Convo was a US company, and then they had a wholly owned subsidiary in Pakistan. And once they changed the CEO legally, so when Usman, the investor who is now CEO, when he became the CEO of Convo Inc. US, they automatically he became the head of executive of Pakistan. But the Pakistan management said, "Ke nahi ji, hum nahi mante. We are not giving you the company," which was, I think, was a really wrong thing to do. It was definitely an illegal thing for them to do.
What were they hoping
And
to
so till
achieve?
this,
What were they hoping to achieve by denying the major shareholder? I believe
so
Umar Rashid would have been a major shareholder. Is that right?
Usman Rashid, yes, absolutely. And it was like a very naive thing. I think they essentially thought that they can keep the company essentially hostage from
Oh,
the CEO of the company. And it was very weird because all the finances, all the money is in the US bank account. So the CEO still control. So the CEO controls all of that. These guys
so
took over the
so it's
servers
like
and stuff like that.
it's like a suicide jacket, a guy holding suicide jacket in Islamabad. I'm not going to let anyone play with it, and not realizing
Yeah,
that it's a big company. Like you said, it was better than Yammer. It had a lot of potential.
yeah.
So moving forward, now I hope now when the Usman is on the helm and the company is back on track, is it soaring in terms of that? Is it doing really well now? Has it catch up, or what's the state of things there?